A dying warrior entrusted his wives to a lone cowboy, and what happened after that was, the sun was high in the sky, and the heat made the air feel like a thick blanket. The land was wide and empty, with only a few scattered rocks and dried grass. It was a place where people had to be strong and careful to survive. The sound of hooves and the loud noise of a battle filled the air. Men shouted, horses screamed, and the dust rose up like a cloud. The fight was not far from a small river where families once came to drink water and rest. Now, it was a place of fear and chaos. Kiyu was a warrior who lived in this land. He was known for his courage and his strong heart. People respected him because he always tried to do what was right. He cared for his people and protected them from danger. He was also a leader who never ran away from trouble. But today, he was in the middle of a battle that felt bigger than anything he had faced before. The rival group had attacked without warning. They wanted control of the land and the water. They wanted to take what Kiyu's people had built. The fight started early in the morning, and now it was late afternoon. Everyone was tired, hungry, and scared. Kiyu had already fought for many hours. His body was sore and his mind was tired, but he refused to give up. He knew that if he stopped, many people would lose their homes and their lives. As he moved through the battlefield, Ki saw his friends falling around him. Some were hurt, some were crying, and some were trying to hide. The noise was so loud that he could barely think. Still, he kept going because he knew the only way to protect his people was to keep fighting. He looked around and saw a small group of enemies moving closer. They were trying to surround him. Ki knew he was in danger, but he did not panic. He took a deep breath and prepared himself. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his side. It was like a heavy weight hitting him. He stumbled and almost fell. He tried to keep going, but the pain grew stronger. Ki realized he had been hurt badly. His vision became blurry and his strength started to leave him. He tried to stand, but his legs felt weak. He looked down and saw that he was bleeding. The blood was dark and thick. He knew that he could not fight much longer. Ki felt a wave of fear, but he did not show it. He knew that fear could make a person weak. He remembered his people, his wives, and the children. He remembered the promise he had made to protect them. He also remembered the stories his father told him about being brave in difficult times. Ki closed his eyes for a moment and tried to calm his mind. He thought about the river and the quiet place where his family lived. He wished he could return there and rest. But he knew that was not possible now. In the middle of the chaos, Ki saw a lone cowboy riding a horse. The cowboy was calm and focused, like he was not afraid of anything. His name was Caleb, and he was known as a man who kept to himself. People said he never stayed in one place for long. He traveled alone and rarely spoke to anyone. Some people thought he was strange, but others believed he was honest and reliable. Today, Ki needed someone like that. Caleb noticed Ki too. He saw the warrior's condition and understood that he was dying. Caleb was not part of the battle, but he had been nearby when the fight started. He was only passing through the land when he saw the conflict. He did not want to join the fight, but he could not ignore a man in need. He rode closer to Kiyu, keeping his horse steady and quiet. He knew that if he rushed in, he might cause more harm. When Caleb reached Kiyu, he stopped his horse and looked at him carefully. Kiyu's face was pale and his breathing was heavy. He was still trying to stand, but he could not. Caleb could see that Kiyu was a strong man, but he was now at the end of his strength. Caleb felt a strange feeling in his heart. He did not know this man, but he could see the courage in his eyes. He felt that he had to help. Kiyu looked at Caleb and spoke with a weak voice. His words were quiet but full of meaning. "You must protect my family," he said. "My wives, Malia and Nanny, they are the only things I have left." Caleb listened carefully. He knew that Kiyu was not just asking for help. He was making a promise. Kiyu was entrusting his most precious treasure to a stranger. Caleb felt the weight of the moment. He understood that this was not an ordinary request. It was a serious responsibility. Caleb did not hesitate. He nodded his head and replied, "I will protect them." Key tried to smile, but the pain was too strong. He reached for his bag and took out a small piece of cloth. Inside was a simple necklace made with beads and a small stone. It was a symbol of Kiyu's family and his love for his wives. He held it out to Caleb. "Give this to them," he said. "Tell them I loved them. Tell them I was proud of them." Caleb accepted the necklace and placed it carefully in his pocket. He knew it was more than a gift. It was a message from a dying man. Kiyu then reached into his belt and pulled out a small pouch of food. He handed it to Caleb as well. "They will need this," Kiyu said. "They must eat, they must survive." Caleb looked at Kiyu and felt a strong desire to help. He had never been responsible for anyone. He had always lived alone. But now he felt that his life was about to change. He looked at the battlefield and saw that the fight was still going on. He knew he had to act fast. Kiyu's breathing became more difficult. He was losing strength quickly. Caleb tried to support him, but Kiyu's body was too weak. Kiyu spoke again, his voice barely audible. "Take them to the river, the quiet place where the grass is green. They will be safe there." Caleb nodded again. He felt a strong sense of duty. He promised Kiyu with all his heart, "I will take them there." Kiyu closed his eyes for a moment. The pain in his body seemed to fade, but his heart was heavy. He thought about his wives and the life he had built. He thought about the children he might never see. His mind wandered to the past, to the times when he was young and full of hope. He remembered the first time he met Malia and Nanny. He remembered their smiles and their kindness. He remembered how they stood by his side during hard times. A tear fell from Kiyu's eye. It was not a tear of weakness. It was a tear of love. He whispered, "Thank you," to Caleb. He wanted to say more, but his body would not allow it. He felt the darkness closing in. Caleb stayed by Kiyu's side. He did not move. He watched the warriors breathing slow down. The battle noises seemed to fade away. The sun continued to burn, but the world felt quieter. Kiyu's last breath came slowly. Caleb closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the loss. Caleb stood up and looked around. He knew the battle would continue, and he could not stay. He had to find Malia and Nanny and keep the promise he had made. He felt a mix of fear and determination. He was not sure how he would find the wives, but he knew he had to try. Caleb turned his horse and rode away from the battlefield. His mind was full of thoughts. He had never imagined that he would be responsible for two women he had never met. He had never imagined that a dying warrior would trust him with their lives. But now he had no choice. He had to keep the promise. As he rode, the dust rose behind him. The sun began to lower in the sky. Caleb could feel the long journey ahead. He knew that the road would be difficult, but he also knew that he had a duty to protect the women. He thought of Kiyu's last words and the necklace in his pocket. He knew that the warrior's love would live on through his promise. Caleb kept riding, and in his heart, he felt a new kind of courage. It was not the courage of a fighter in a battle. It was the courage of a man who was willing to change his life to help others. The desert was quiet now, but Caleb knew that the real challenge was just beginning. Caleb rode away from the battlefield with the weight of the promise heavy in his heart. The dust from the fight still hung in the air, making everything look pale and distant. He could still hear the echoes of the shouts and the sound of horses, but now those noises were far behind him. Ahead was only the open land, the long road, and the unknown future. He had never planned to become responsible for anyone. Caleb had always lived a life of freedom. He had no home, no family, and no place where he truly belonged. He traveled from town to town, from camp to camp, doing small jobs and then moving on. He liked being alone because it meant he didn't have to answer to anyone. He didn't have to care for anyone. He didn't have to worry about being hurt, but now everything had changed. He had promised a dying warrior that he would protect two women. The promise was not just a simple request. It was a bond. Caleb could feel it in his bones. He knew he could not break it. He also knew that he would not be able to forget it. The sun was slowly setting, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and red. Caleb knew he needed to find a place to rest before night came. He also needed to think about where he would begin searching for the women. He had no idea where they were. Kiyu had not said where they were hiding. Caleb only knew that they were somewhere near the river, near the quiet place with green grass. Caleb stopped his horse by a small hill and took a moment to rest. He looked at the necklace in his pocket. It was simple, but it carried a powerful meaning. The beads were made of small stones, each one carefully chosen. Caleb could feel the shape of the necklace through the fabric. He touched it gently, thinking about the women who would wear it. He wondered what they looked like, how they felt, and how they would react when they saw him. Caleb also thought about the warrior Kiyu. He had never met him before, but he had seen the courage in his eyes. He had seen the love he had for his wives. Caleb felt respect for the man, even though he was now gone. He promised himself that he would honor Kiyu's memory by keeping his word. After a short rest, Caleb continued riding. The road was rough and the horse moved slowly. The land was empty, but Caleb felt that something was watching him. He was not sure if it was a feeling or if someone was actually there. He had been alone for so long that even the smallest sound made him alert. The wind moved the grass and the leaves of the trees rustled softly. Every sound seemed to be a warning. As he rode, Caleb remembered the way Kiyu had spoken. His voice had been quiet but strong. The warrior had not asked for help. He had given Caleb a duty. Caleb realized that this duty was not just about protecting the women. It was also about proving that people could trust him. He had always been seen as a lone man, someone who could not be counted on. Now he had a chance to change that. The night arrived slowly. The sky became dark and the stars appeared one by one. Caleb found a small clearing near the river where he could rest for the night. The river water was calm and quiet, reflecting the moonlight. Caleb felt a strange sense of peace there, even though his heart was heavy. He made a small fire and cooked a little food. The fire crackled softly and the smoke rose into the sky. Caleb sat by the fire and thought about what he needed to do next. He knew that finding the women would not be easy. They could be anywhere. They could be hiding in the hills or they could be traveling to another place. Caleb had no map, no guide, and no help. He was completely alone, but Caleb was not the kind of man to give up. He had faced hard times before and he had always survived. He knew he had to use his skills to find them. He thought about what Kiyu had said, the quiet place with green grass. Caleb decided that the first thing he would do was follow the river. Rivers often lead to settlements or camps. People needed water to live, and the women might be staying near the river where it was safe and quiet. The next morning, Caleb continued along the riverbank. The sun was bright, and the air felt fresh. The land looked more alive now, with small trees and bushes along the water. Caleb rode slowly, keeping his eyes open for any sign of the women. He looked for footprints, broken branches, or any sign of a camp. He also watched for any danger. The land could be dangerous for travelers, especially for women who were alone. After several hours, Caleb saw something that made his heart beat faster. On the ground near the river were two sets of footprints. They looked fresh. Caleb's heart lifted. He knew this could be the sign he had been waiting for. He followed the footprints carefully, making sure not to lose them. The footprints led him through a narrow path between the trees. The path was quiet and shaded. Caleb felt a sense of hope. He was closer now. He slowed his horse and moved carefully. The path opened into a small clearing, and there he saw a small camp. There was a fire pit, a few bags, and some blankets. Caleb's heart was pounding. He stopped his horse and quietly approached the camp. He saw two women sitting near the fire, talking softly. They looked tired and worried. One of them had a necklace around her neck. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. It was the same necklace that Kiyu had given him. He knew it was them. Caleb slowly stepped forward and called out in a gentle voice, "Hello, my name is Caleb. I am here to help." The women looked up, startled. Their eyes were wide with fear. They did not know who Caleb was or what he wanted. They looked at him carefully, trying to decide if he was a friend or a threat. Caleb could see the fear in their eyes, and he understood. They had been through a terrible event, and they had no reason to trust a stranger. Caleb held up his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. "I was with your husband. He asked me to protect you." The women stared at him for a long moment. They looked at the necklace and then back at Caleb. The woman wearing the necklace began to cry. Her eyes filled with tears, and she covered her face with her hands. Caleb felt a deep sadness in his heart. He realized how much pain they had been through. The other woman stood up slowly. She looked at Caleb with strength in her eyes. She spoke in a calm voice, but her words were firm. "Why should we trust you?" she asked. "You are a stranger." Caleb nodded. He understood their doubt. He said, "I know. But I promise you I will not hurt you. I will help you. Your husband trusted me with your lives. I will not break that trust." The women looked at each other. They seemed unsure, but they could also see the truth in Caleb's eyes. He was not lying. He was not trying to trick them. He was honest. After a moment, the woman who had been crying spoke again. "We have nowhere else to go," she said. "We are tired. We have been hiding. We do not know what will happen next." Caleb nodded. He understood. He said, "Then come with me. I will take you to a safe place." The women hesitated, but they could feel that Caleb was sincere. They slowly gathered their belongings and prepared to leave. Caleb helped them with their bags and led them to his horse. The women climbed onto the horse carefully, one at a time. Caleb walked beside them, guiding the horse and making sure they were safe. As they started moving, the women looked back at the camp one last time. They felt sadness for the life they were leaving behind. They felt fear for the unknown future. But they also felt a small spark of hope. They knew they were not alone anymore. Caleb rode slowly, leading them away from the camp. He did not speak much. He wanted to give them time to adjust. He knew the journey would be difficult, but he also knew that they were stronger than they seemed. They had already survived so much. As the day passed, Caleb, Malia, and Nanny continued along the river. The land changed from open plains to small hills and trees. The sun was warm, but the air felt calm. The women began to relax slightly. They started to talk softly, sharing their thoughts and feelings. Caleb listened carefully. He did not interrupt them. He wanted to earn their trust, and he knew that listening was the first step. By the end of the day, they reached a small village. The village was quiet and peaceful. People were going about their daily lives. Caleb knew that this could be a place where the women could find safety. But he also knew that they would need time to feel comfortable. They needed a place where they could rest and heal. Caleb looked at the women and said, "We will stay here for a while. You can rest. You can eat. You can feel safe." The women nodded. They were tired, but they also felt relieved. For the first time since the battle, they felt a small sense of peace. They had a protector. They had someone who cared. And they had hoped that their lives could be rebuilt. The village was small, but it felt like a safe place compared to the wide, open land they had been traveling through. There were a few houses made of wood and stone, and small gardens where people grew vegetables. The sound of children playing and people talking made the air feel calm and normal. Caleb, Malia, and Nanny walked through the village slowly, taking in everything around them. Caleb led the women to a small house at the edge of the village. It belonged to a kind man named Elias, who was known for helping travelers. Elias was a quiet person who lived alone. He had lost his family years ago, and he had learned to live simply. When he saw Caleb and the women, he did not ask many questions. He could see that they were tired and needed help. Elias welcomed them into his home and offered them food and water. He gave them blankets and a place to rest. Malia and Nanny were grateful, but they were still cautious. They had been through too much to trust easily. They sat quietly, watching everything around them. Caleb sat beside them and tried to make them feel comfortable. He did not force them to talk. He only offered a gentle smile and a kind presence. After a while, Malia finally spoke. "Thank you for helping us," she said softly. "We did not expect anyone to care." Caleb looked at her and said, "You deserve help. You have been through a hard time. I will not leave you alone." Nanny, who had been silent, looked up and asked, "Why did you help us? You don't even know us." Caleb took a moment before answering. He wanted to choose his words carefully. He said, "Because your husband trusted me. He asked me to protect you. I promised him. I will keep that promise." Malia and Nanny looked at each other. They could feel the truth in Caleb's words. They could also see that he was not trying to control them or make them feel weak. He was simply being honest. Days passed, and the women slowly began to feel more comfortable in the village. They started to help Elias with small tasks like cooking, cleaning, and gardening. They worked quietly and they did not speak much about their past, but Caleb noticed that they were slowly changing. They were beginning to smile again. They were starting to feel hope. Caleb, on the other hand, began to feel something new in his heart. He had always been a loner, but he was now learning what it meant to care for others. He found himself thinking about the women even when they were not around. He wanted to make sure they were safe and happy. He also wanted to make sure they had a future. One morning, while Caleb was out gathering water, he noticed a group of men in the distance. They were walking toward the village. Caleb felt a sudden feeling of worry. He did not know who they were or why they were coming. He could not tell if they were friendly or dangerous. Caleb decided to approach them carefully. He walked slowly, keeping his distance. As he got closer, he could see that they were not from the village. Their clothes looked different and they carried a serious expression. Caleb felt his heart beat faster. He knew that this could be trouble. When Caleb reached the men, he spoke in a calm voice. "Hello," he said. "Who are you? What brings you here?" The men looked at Caleb and then at the village. One of them spoke, "We are travelers. We are looking for food and water." Caleb did not trust their words. He could feel something in the way they spoke. They seemed too calm, too confident. Caleb thought about Malia and Nanny. He thought about the promise he had made. He could not let them be in danger. Caleb decided to bring the men to the village leader so they could be checked properly. He led them to the village center, where a small group of people had gathered. The village leader, a woman named Hannah, listened carefully as Caleb explained the situation. Hannah was known for being wise and fair. She had helped the village stay peaceful for many years. Hannah spoke to the men and asked them why they were traveling. She also asked if they had any weapons. The men said they did not. Hannah looked at them carefully and then asked, "Do you know the warrior Kiyu?" The men looked surprised. They whispered among themselves and one of them said, "We have heard of him. He was a strong man." Hannah nodded. She turned to Caleb and said, "I think these men may be connected to the conflict. We must be careful." Caleb felt a knot in his stomach. He knew that the rival group might be looking for the women. He knew that they could be trying to find them. He looked at Malia and Nanny, who were standing nearby. Their faces were tense and their eyes were wide. They were afraid. Caleb walked closer to the women and whispered, "Stay calm. I will handle this." Malia and Nanny nodded, but their fear was still visible. They had been through so much, and they did not want to go through it again. Caleb understood their feelings. He promised himself that he would not let them be harmed. Hannah spoke again, "We will keep a close watch on these men. For now, they can stay in the village, but they must follow the rules. If they cause any trouble, they will be asked to leave." Caleb felt relieved that Hannah had taken the situation seriously. He knew that the village was a safe place because of people like her. He also knew that he needed to be careful. He could not let his guard down. That night, Caleb sat by the fire with Malia and Nanny. He could see that they were still worried. He wanted to comfort them, but he did not know how. He knew that words were not enough. He needed to show them through his actions that he was trustworthy. He said softly, "I know you are scared. I would be scared too, But I promise you I will not let anyone hurt you. You are safe here." Malia looked at Caleb and asked, "What if they come back? What if they find us?" Caleb thought for a moment. He knew that the women were not safe until the threat was gone. He said, "We will be ready. We will not run away. We will stand together." Nanny nodded slowly. She looked at Caleb with a new sense of respect. She realized that he was not just a protector. He was someone who believed in them. He was someone who saw them as people, not as objects or trophies. That made a big difference. The next few days were quiet. The village returned to its normal life. The children played, the adults worked, and the days passed slowly. Caleb continued to help the women. He brought them food, water, and supplies. He also helped them feel welcome in the village. But Caleb knew that the threat was still there. He could not forget the men who had arrived. He knew that he needed to prepare for anything. He began to plan. He thought about ways to keep the women safe. He thought about how to protect the village. He also thought about how to help the women become stronger. Caleb began to teach Malia and Nanny some new skills. He taught them how to handle simple tools and how to move carefully through the land. He also taught them how to stay calm in difficult situations. The women listened carefully. They wanted to be strong. They wanted to be able to protect themselves. As time passed, Caleb began to notice something else. The women were changing in a different way. They were not just becoming stronger. They were becoming more confident. They began to smile more often. They began to laugh. They began to talk about their dreams. Malia said one day, "I want to grow vegetables and sell them in the market. I want to be independent." Nanny added, "I want to learn how to sew. I want to make clothes for people." Caleb felt proud of them. He knew that these dreams were small, but they were important. They showed that the women were beginning to believe in a future. They were beginning to believe in themselves. Caleb realized that his promise was not only about protecting them. It was also about helping them rebuild their lives. He understood that the real battle was not the one fought with weapons. It was the battle to stay strong and hopeful after everything they had lost. The village became a quiet and calm place for Caleb, Malia, and Nanny. After the threat of the strangers had passed, the people began to trust them. They saw that the women were respectful and hardworking. They also saw that Caleb was honest and kind. The village leader, Hannah, continued to watch over them, making sure that everything stayed peaceful. Malia and Nanny were still careful, but they were no longer scared all the time. They started to feel like they belonged somewhere. They had a roof over their heads, food to eat, and people who cared. The village had become a safe place, and that meant a lot to them. For the first time in a long time, they felt they could breathe. Caleb worked hard to make sure the women were comfortable. He helped them with daily tasks, like gathering water, carrying wood, and fixing small things around the house. He also helped them learn the language of the village. Malia and Nanny had spoken their own language before, and it was difficult for them to understand everything. Caleb and Hannah taught them simple words and phrases, so they could communicate with the people more easily. The days went by, and the women began to feel stronger. They started to take part in village life. They helped with cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the children. They also started to share their stories with others. At first, they only shared small things, but slowly they began to talk about their lives before the battle. They spoke about their families, their home, and their husband, Key. The village listened with respect. They were not shocked or judgmental. Instead, they offered support and comfort. One evening, the village held a small celebration. It was not a big festival, but it was a time when people gathered to share food and music. The children played, and the adults talked and laughed. Caleb watched as Malia and Nanny joined the celebration. They looked happier than he had seen them in a long time. They smiled and danced gently, enjoying the moment. Caleb felt a strange emotion inside him. He realized that he was beginning to care for them in a way he had never expected. He did not know if it was love, friendship, or something else, but he knew that he felt a deep connection. He also knew that he had a responsibility to protect them and help them live a good life. One day, Caleb met with Hannah to discuss the future. Hannah had been watching the women closely, and she had noticed how strong they had become. She said, "Caleb, you have done a good job. The women are doing well. They are becoming part of the village." Caleb nodded. "Yes, they are stronger now, but I still worry. The past may come back. I don't want them to be hurt again." Hannah looked at him with understanding. "It is natural to worry," she said, "but you cannot live your life in fear. The best way to protect them is to help them build a strong life here." Caleb thought about her words. He realized that Hannah was right. He had been focusing too much on the past. He needed to focus on the future. He needed to help the women build a life that was not only safe but also meaningful. So Caleb began to make plans. He talked to Malia and Nanny about what they wanted to do. He asked them what they dreamed of. They spoke with excitement and hope. Malia said she wanted to grow vegetables and sell them in the market. Nanny said she wanted to learn sewing and make clothes. Caleb helped them set up small projects. He helped Malia find a small piece of land where she could grow vegetables. He helped Nanny find a sewing kit and some cloth. He also helped them learn how to sell their products in the village market. He taught them how to count money, how to speak to customers, and how to keep their goods safe. The women worked hard. They woke up early each morning and worked until evening. They did not complain. They were determined to build a new life. Caleb admired their strength. He realized that they were not weak. They were survivors. They had been through terrible things, but they were still standing. As time passed, the women began to gain respect from the village people. They became known for their hard work and kind hearts. People started to buy Malia's vegetables because they were fresh and healthy. People also started to ask Nanny to make clothes for their families. The women were proud of themselves. They felt useful. They felt alive. Caleb watched them grow with pride. He felt a sense of happiness that he had never felt before. He realized that helping them had changed him. He was no longer the lonely cowboy. He was now a part of something bigger. He was part of a community. But even as their lives improved, Caleb still noticed that the women were careful about their feelings. They did not talk much about love or friendship. They still remembered Key. They still felt the pain of losing him. Caleb understood that they could never forget him. He did not want them to forget. He wanted them to remember him with respect and love. One afternoon, Malia came to Caleb and said, "Caleb, I want to ask you something." Caleb looked at her and said, "Of course, you can ask anything." Malia took a deep breath and said, "Do you think it is wrong to feel something for someone else after losing a loved one?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. He did not want to answer too quickly. He knew this was a sensitive topic. He said, "No, I don't think it is wrong. Love is not a crime. It is a part of life. You can remember your husband and still find happiness." Nanny nodded slowly. She looked down and said, "I want to be happy again, but I am scared. I don't know if it is possible." Caleb gently placed his hand on her shoulder. He said, "It is possible. You deserve happiness. You deserve a life that is full of peace." Malia and Nanny looked at each other. They seemed to understand. They were not ready to speak about it openly, but they felt that Caleb was someone they could trust. They felt safe with him. Days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. The seasons changed. The village grew busier. The women continued to work hard. Caleb continued to help them. He also continued to learn from them. He learned their language better. He learned their stories. He learned their values. One day, while walking through the village, Caleb saw a group of children playing near the river. They were laughing and running. Caleb smiled. He felt a warmth in his heart. He realized that he was no longer the same man who had arrived at the battlefield. He had changed. He had become kinder, stronger, and more connected to others. That night, Caleb sat outside the house and looked at the stars. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. He thought about Kiyu and the promise he had made. He thought about Malia and Nanny and how they had grown. He felt grateful. He also felt a sense of peace. He knew that he had done something important. He had kept his promise. He had helped two women find a new life. He had helped them find hope again. But Caleb also knew that life was not always easy. He knew that there might still be challenges ahead. He knew that he had to stay strong, he had to stay ready, he had to protect the women and the village. He stood up and went inside. He saw Malia and Nanny sitting by the fire talking softly. They looked calm and content. Caleb smiled and sat beside them. They did not need words. They only needed each other. The quiet village was now a place of healing. It was a place where people could rebuild their lives. It was a place where hope was possible. Caleb knew that this was not the end of their story, but it was a new beginning. The days in the village continued to pass with a peaceful rhythm. The sun rose, people worked, children played, and the women continued to build their lives. Malia and Nanny had become part of the community. They were no longer strangers. They were friends. They were also known for their strong spirit and kind hearts. Caleb had become a respected figure in the village too. People admired him for his honesty and care. He was no longer seen as just a lonely cowboy. One morning, Caleb woke up early and noticed a strange silence. The birds were not singing as loudly as they usually did. The wind felt calm, but there was a feeling in the air that something was different. Caleb felt a small worry inside his heart. He did not know why, but he had learned to trust his instincts. He stood up and went outside to look around. As he walked through the village, he noticed that people were whispering. Some of them were looking toward the road. Caleb asked Hannah, the village leader, what was happening. Hannah looked at him with a serious expression and said, "Some travelers have been seen on the road. They are coming this way." Caleb's heart tightened. He remembered the strangers who had arrived before. He thought about the rival group that had attacked Kiu's people. He wondered if they had finally found the village. He quickly went to find Malia and Nanny. He wanted to make sure they were safe. Malia and Nanny were in their small house, preparing food for the day. When Caleb entered, they looked up and saw the worry on his face. Nanny asked, "What is wrong?" Caleb took a deep breath and said, "Some people are coming. We don't know who they are yet, but we must be ready." Malia stood up slowly and said, "We have worked so hard to feel safe." "I do not want to lose that," Caleb nodded. "I know, but we will not run away. We will stay here and protect our home." The women looked at each other. They felt a mixture of fear and determination. They had survived before, and they knew they could survive again. But they also knew that they did not want to go back to the life of hiding and running. Caleb went outside and gathered the village people. He spoke to them in a calm voice. "We do not know who is coming, but we must be prepared. We will welcome them if they are peaceful. But we will also protect our village if needed." Hannah agreed with Caleb. She said, "We will stay calm and careful. We will not cause trouble. We will show them that we are a peaceful community." The villagers nodded. They trusted Caleb and Hannah. They began to prepare. Some people gathered food and water. Others cleaned the area near the entrance of the village. They made sure the children were safe and kept them inside. Everyone was working together. As the sun moved higher in the sky, the travelers finally appeared. They were a group of men and women walking slowly along the road. They looked tired and dusty from their journey. They did not look angry or threatening. They looked like people who had been traveling for a long time. Caleb watched them carefully. He could see that they were not carrying weapons. They had simple bags and blankets. Caleb felt a sense of relief. Maybe these people were not dangerous. Maybe they were just travelers in need. The group stopped at the edge of the village. One of them stepped forward and spoke in a gentle voice. "Hello," he said. "We are travelers. We are looking for a safe place to rest." Hannah stepped forward and welcomed them. She said, "You are welcome here. You may rest and share food with us, but you must follow our rules." The travelers nodded. They looked grateful. They entered the village slowly and quietly. Caleb watched them closely, still feeling cautious. He knew that not everyone could be trusted, but he also believed in the good in people. He hoped that these travelers were honest. Malia and Nanny watched from a distance. They felt nervous, but they also felt curious. They wondered who these people were and why they were traveling. They were not sure if they should trust them. The travelers were welcomed into the village. They were given food, water, and a place to rest. The village people spoke to them kindly. The travelers shared their stories. They explained that they had been traveling for weeks and were looking for a safe place to stay for a while. As the day passed, the travelers began to feel more comfortable. They thanked the village people for their kindness. They said they were not looking for trouble. They only wanted peace. Caleb listened to their stories. He learned that the travelers were from a faraway land and were moving to a new place because their home had become unsafe. They were tired and worried, but they were hopeful. Caleb felt sympathy for them. He knew how it felt to lose a home and not know where to go. Malia and Nanny started to feel less afraid. They began to see the travelers as people, not as a threat. They began to think that maybe the world was not always cruel. Maybe there were still kind people who wanted to live in peace. As evening came, the village held a small gathering. The travelers were invited to join. There was food, music, and quiet conversation. Malia and Nanny sat near Caleb and listened. They could feel the warmth of the community. They felt a sense of belonging. Suddenly, one of the travelers spoke up. "We have heard about the warrior Kiyu," he said. "He was known for his courage and his kindness. We heard that he had a wife who was strong and brave. We also heard that he had another wife who was wise and kind." Malia and Nanny looked at each other, surprised. Caleb felt a tight feeling in his chest. He wondered how these travelers knew about Kiyu. He did not know if this was a good sign or a warning. The traveler continued, "We have been looking for the wives of Kiyu. We wanted to make sure they were safe. We wanted to thank them for their courage." Malia felt her heart beat faster. She did not know what to say. She felt both fear and hope. She looked at Caleb and saw that he was calm. Caleb had learned to control his emotions. He knew that he needed to stay strong for the women. Caleb stood up and spoke to the travelers. He said, "Kiyu's wives are here. They are safe. They are part of our village now." The travelers looked surprised. They did not expect to find them so easily. They approached Malia and Nanny slowly, showing respect. They bowed their heads and spoke kindly. "We are happy to see you alive," they said. "We are grateful that you are safe." Malia felt tears in her eyes. She did not know what to say. She looked at the travelers and then at Caleb. She realized that she had a life now. She had a home. She had people who cared. She had a future. The travelers stayed in the village for a few days. They helped with small tasks. They shared their stories. They also learned about the lives of Malia and Nanny. They listened to their stories with respect. They did not judge them. They only offered support. One day, the travelers prepared to continue their journey. Before they left, they spoke to Caleb, Malia, and Nanny. The traveler who had spoken earlier said, "We are sorry for what happened to your husband. We know it was a difficult time, but we are happy to see that you have found a safe place." Malia spoke softly, "Thank you. We are grateful for your kindness. We are also grateful to Caleb. He protected us when we needed it most." Nanny added, "We have learned that life can be kind again. We have learned that we can be strong." Caleb felt proud of them. He knew that they had grown stronger because they chose not to give up. He also knew that their courage had helped the village become a better place. He felt that the promise he had made to Kiyu had not only saved their lives but also brought hope to others. When the travelers left, the village returned to its normal life. The quiet days continued, but the people now had a new sense of unity. They had learned that kindness could change lives. They had learned that trust and respect were important. Caleb, Malia, and Nanny continued to live in the village. They continued to work, to grow, and to dream. They were no longer only survivors. They were builders of a new life. Caleb looked at the women one evening and realized that the promise he made had changed him too. He was no longer a lonely man. He was a protector. He was a friend. He was part of a community. Malia and Nanny looked at Caleb and smiled. They had found a place where they could be safe and happy. They had found a new life. They knew that the past would always be a part of them, but they also knew that the future was bright. As the sun set over the village, Caleb felt a deep sense of peace. He knew that the journey had been difficult, but it had also been meaningful. He had kept his promise, and in doing so, he had helped two women find hope again. The story did not end with the battle. It continued with a new beginning, a life built on trust, kindness, and courage. And that was what made it truly powerful.